Hey there, welcome back to this week's episode of the podcast. I'm excited that you're here, particularly if you're someone who is a coach or perhaps you work in the personal development space. More generally, maybe you're a wellness coach or a practitioner of some kind, or if you're someone who aspires to be, because what I'm going to get into today is really kind of getting underneath the hood of this concept of self-improvement. All right. And how actually I think the call for us in this industry is to start moving beyond self-improvement. Because if you think about why people come to coaching, why they want to work with someone maybe who is in the wellness space or a healer or whatever you are, they come there with this goal of self-improvement. They want to grow. They want to be better in themselves. They want to work towards their goals and they're ready to take on that next challenge and chapter in their life. This is why they sign up to work with you, okay? And they want to go on a journey with you. But the interesting thing that's starting to emerge and the conversation's starting to rumble in this industry, and that conversation is around why so much self-improvement work, personal growth work, doesn't actually lead to real transformation. Okay, so it's a bit of a controversial topic today, all right, but I think it's one that you'll really enjoy because what I've discovered after, I'm someone who's been in this industry for 12 years now, which is quite a long time, for this particular industry. It's quite a new one. I've seen some patterns, kind of not just in my own practice, but in the practice of my clients, what they notice, and also just people in the industry generally, okay? And I'm noticing that there are these sort of things that we don't like to talk about in the industry, okay? And one of them is exactly this. Why does self-improvement sometimes fail? We love to talk about the shining success stories. We love to talk about the glowing testimonials, and all of that stuff is brilliant and appropriate and awesome. And I think there's also a conversation that needs to be had around, well, why is it that sometimes this kind of more, what I would call more of a superficial notion of self-improvement, why does that fall on its butt quite often? So let's look at that, because I wanted to sort of start this off by saying, if you're someone who's been in the industry for a while, or if you're someone who's looking to join it, okay, inevitably there will come a point in your practice where it feels like clients keep coming back session after session with the same story. Maybe that story looks a little bit different or it comes up dressed a little bit differently, all right, but generally it's the same pattern. And it's really odd because you're doing everything right as a coach. You're working with them on setting some great goals. You're laying out the map of where you're going to go together, the work that you're going to do. You're coaching them through some of the challenges, and you're having great conversations. They're seeing some progress, okay? But still, they keep slipping back into old patterns, old paradigms, and old stuff that's kind of keeping them away from the goals and the coaching intentions that they say they want to achieve, right? Have you seen this? Because it's not an unusual situation. And this is what I want to kind of say right up front. This doesn't mean that anyone's a bad coach or not doing your job. Like if you're anything like me, and I'm going to share a little bit more about a personal story in a minute, you've probably had a lot of experience. You have great intentions. You're good at what you do, but there's just sort of this sort of little extra piece that you can't quite put your finger on sometimes with certain clients around, oh, why do they keep slipping back? Like, what's going on there? So the answer, the really simple answer to this, which is obviously what we're going to get into and explore a lot more today, is that there's some kind of unconscious terrain here. There are some shadow dynamics typically that are at play, and it's when these unconscious dynamics come to the surface, that's when the usual, I suppose, the map that we're used to working towards as a coach, or the map that we're used to walking as a coach, sometimes just doesn't quite feel adequate. It's like we need a different type of map when these scenarios come up. So let me tell you a little bit about a story first off, because as I said, I've been working as a coach. I've been running my own business now for 12 years. Before that, I trained as a registered psychologist. I went into the corporate space as well. I did a lot around training and development, leadership coaching and development, all of that good stuff, okay? And what I noticed is I'm an amazing coach, right? I've worked with hundreds of people. I've helped people get incredible results. And there's always some people where it's like, oh, okay, there's so much potential here, okay, but there's something that keeps taking them out of the process. There's something that keeps coming up around sabotage and resistance. And so there's a particular client who obviously shall remain anonymous, but this person probably represents maybe people that you've seen in your own practice and certainly others that I've worked with too. But if I think back to this particular story, this client signed up to work with me because she wanted to start her business. Okay, she had a great experience, loads of potential, lots of real world kind of lived experience as well. Amazing person. And the thing is, she wanted to create this business, and we were doing some coaching together, business coaching specifically, and she was following all of the steps. She had an amazing website that she'd created. We got her clear around her messaging and her offering. She felt really good about that. She was excited about the pricing and the marketing strategy. All of this stuff was great, and she was super excited. But when it came to really putting herself out there, actually marketing, actually pulling the trigger on showing up, booking discovery calls, speaking with people and selling her product, she kept sabotaging her progress. Okay. And it really, I'm trying to think back because this was sort of towards the beginning of my journey, but I remember it really surprised me at the time because I'd coached her brilliantly, right? I'm an experienced coach. I've got like over 20 years of professional experience. I've led people, I've coached people, I've worked with executives right through to all people at all levels, okay? I've been doing this work for years, but I was surprised because I'm like, what's going on here? It's like she's taking all of the right action steps. She's doing the homework. She's being amazing. She's following the map. She even knew what to expect in terms of the pressure points on the journey. She knew that she wasn't great, for example, at setting up some of the back end and the IT and stuff for her business. So she knew that there was some help that she was going to have to get around that. She knew where those pressure points were, but it's like there was this almost like an invisible pit, okay, that she would fall into whenever she got close to just having to get visible and put herself out there. So is this ringing any bells, all right? And what I noticed with this client in particular is that she would start second guessing herself and she'd sort of procrastinate and she would sort of say things like, oh, I feel like I just need to go back and revise my website or revise my offer. It just isn't quite feeling aligned, even though she was just excited about it like the other day kind of thing. So she'd kind of bring in this procrastination and this second guessing herself. And so we would talk about that and we would revise some of where she felt like she felt misaligned and what was happening there. We'd revise her goals and I'd help her focus on developing her positive mindset and beliefs about what was possible, get her reconnected to the big goal and vision that she said she wanted, all of that stuff that my training taught me to do. But still, the pattern would continue. And I remember at the time, again, feeling really perplexed. This was an amazing, ideal client, okay? And I was sort of reading at the time, and I was studying. Actually, I was studying some somatic modalities and nervous system work and things, and I'd qualified in that. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll start bringing some of these tools, okay, to our sessions. So I knew that there was something deeper, obviously, going on beneath the surface here, but I thought, well, maybe I can just help her feel more connected with what was coming up for her. We supported her in developing a deep listening practice, and she started to feel more regulated in these moments and better able to handle like some of the anxiety and things that might come up in those moments of visibility and stuff. But still, she wasn't moving forward. And it really perplexed me because all of the wisdom out there, I guess, in the personal growth space says that things like mindset and strategy isn't enough. And I think we know that, but we've got to work with the body as well. And yet it still felt like to me that there was a missing piece to this kind of metaphorical map that we were trying to navigate together. There was this invisible hole, as I said, that she kept falling down. So I wanted to just share that story. And again, I want to sort of emphasize this isn't unusual. A lot of people don't talk about the moments where their clients backslide, or maybe where people aren't quite getting the traction that you had hoped for. And this doesn't happen because we're bad coaches. I want to be really clear on that. But often it's because our training has missed something really important. All right. It's missed something very important about these unconscious dynamics within the psyche. It's missed something really important about the shadow and the subconscious mind generally as well. Okay. No coach training out there, generic coach training, really prepares coaches to work with that. And so what happens is, and I noticed this obviously in my own initial coach training too, which was amazing, but there were gaps in it. And so as coaches and healers and wellness pros and all of that good stuff, okay, and I think we kind of know this intuitively, by the way, that there's a little bit of a gap, but I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But the temptation is sometimes to stay really focused on the strategy side of things. And so maybe if you're a business coach, it's working on the marketing and the sales plan and the metrics and all of that sort of stuff. Or if you're in the wellness space, it's, we stay focused on the wellness plan and the healthy habits, okay, or the weight loss journey and counting macros and all of that sort of stuff, okay. Or if we're in the relationship field, maybe we focus on how to have better conversations, how to set better boundaries, how to lean into our sensuality more and all of that. And the map is usually pretty clear around that, okay. It's like that's the terrain we know, that's the terrain that we've been taught, that we have expertise in, okay. We probably have a personal journey in that space too, all right. But often we stumble when we realize our clients are kind of hitting up against or falling down, as I said before, hitting up against what feels like an invisible barrier and these hidden holes on their journey. Yeah. And so I think when you look at how that shows up for people, some of which I've sort of already shared, but when a client's starting to stumble into these invisible barriers because there'll be signs. Yes, there's a self-sabotage, which I've sort of spoken about. So that can look like procrastination and, kind of getting ready to get ready and, oh, this doesn't feel aligned. And, even though they were just saying it felt really aligned 2 days ago, okay. All right. There could be some procrastination stuff there and perfectionism, but also this sense of maybe some negative self-talk starts to slip in, this sort of these looping kind of negative self-talk moments and recurring patterns. Possibly they start not holding themselves accountable to the goals that they say that they wanted or had committed to for that week or the next month or whatever. Possibly they start even feeling some imposter syndrome and comparisonitis and all of that sort of stuff too, and start making excuses about, oh, well, my dog's sick and, life stuff happens, okay? And it can be a really amazing excuse to kind of hook into, all right? Particularly when there's some self-sabotage and things at play. Maybe they even sort of disappear on you for a little while, or you're reaching out or trying to check in, but maybe they go a little bit ghost and they're starting to feel like they're plateauing a little bit. So there's all of these sort of signs, okay? And I think what's really important here, particularly if you're someone who's just getting started in the coaching industry, is that these aren't advanced issues in coaching. This stuff doesn't happen 10 years into your coaching career. It starts right at the beginning. Like I just shared that story before. That was one of my first clients that I'd worked with. And so it was like, oh, all right, it's not unusual. These aren't advanced issues. They show up from the beginning and they do recur, okay? Some of our clients just sail straight through, which is amazing. The majority do. But I think the ones that start to really make a difference to our practice are the ones where we get stumped a little bit. It's like, well, what is it? What's going on here in terms of them not being able to move forward towards the goals they say they want to achieve? And so we can support our clients through these moments, and we try our best, and we put a new plan in place, and we sort of, draw a line in the sand to move forward. But more often than not, they just start to slip back again. So what is really happening here? As I said before, the answer is that there's some unconscious dynamics at play. That's the short answer. There's some unconscious and very invisible, I would say, terrain that's kind of coming up on this map that you're trying to guide your clients with, right? And that's what I want to really bring to life today, because if we don't look at this, and I think this is really important to name as well, if we don't look at this, sometimes it's very easy, I think, as a coach to sort of start thinking, oh, is this actually an ideal client? Are they motivated enough? Do they really want this? Okay, maybe they're not ready. And by the way, there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of that narrative out there in the coaching space too, where it's like, you've got to work with your ideal clients. And if you're dragging people across the finish line, then they're not an ideal client for you. And look, there's some truth to all of it. And I would get very, very curious, because sometimes this is just a little blind spot that we have. And I don't even think it's a blind spot as much as intuitively, I feel like we kind of know that there's something there that's going on underneath the surface, that there's something deeper that's shaping behavior and resistance and visibility and their ability to sustain their success, all of that sort of stuff. But much of the coach training that's out there just doesn't actually give you a framework for understanding it. So they're not wrong, okay? They're just a bit incomplete, frankly. And that incompleteness of that map is the thing that really can hold us back, not just in terms of our clients' success, but also our own business growth as well, okay? Because, you know, that can really cause us to doubt ourselves when we have clients that maybe slip back or don't quite get the results that maybe we'd intended or we'd agreed upon. And it can sort of hold us back in terms of our growth in revenue and things like that too. I think there's some very real world impacts of this stuff. But yeah, like as I said, you know, most coaching and personal development trainings aren't necessarily wrong, okay? But I think it's just many are operating with a very kind of an incomplete map of transformation, all right? They might focus heavily on conscious change or just the body, for example, whilst kind of overlooking the unconscious structures that organize all of that stuff, the structures that organize our sense of identity, why we're behaving the way that we behave, our adaptation, the resistance that comes up, a lot of these very competing forces within our psyche that really just don't get addressed in most trainings that exist out there. So what I wanted to do kind of for the next part of this episode is to walk through a few of the places that I feel modern self-development, modern coaching often just stops at the surface, and what becomes possible when we work at greater depth, all right? So I wanted to kind of dive right into, as the first part, why self-improvement eventually plateaus. Because self-improvement, as I said before, it's kind of a core tenet of the coaching and personal development world, isn't it? You look at all the courses out there, you look at what people are talking about, you look at what people are building businesses around, and it's all about things like goals, better habits, a more positive mindset, motivation, optimization, performance psychology, okay? All of this good stuff, all great, by the way. But really, when we start to get underneath the surface of that, what we realize is that most self-improvement that's out there, it focuses on almost like managing behavior. Have you noticed that? It's kind of like, we're going to manage this. We're going to set better goals. We're going to set smart goals, all right? We're going to just look at how we can reframe some of that mindset rather than really get in and underneath and get into the guts of what's kind of leading to and contributing to that, okay? So it's like most self-improvement focuses on managing behavior rather than really understanding the structures, the unconscious structures that are producing that behavior. Because the truth is, right, it's like you can override yourself temporarily, right? You can override yourself in the moment, okay? You can reframe a thought, you can better regulate yourself in a moment, all good stuff. But you can do that without actually understanding yourself. Do you see what I mean? So you can override yourself without actually understanding yourself. And it's that understanding of yourself that supports real growth and real change. And if we think about this in terms of our clients, helping them actually understand themselves and do something about it, Okay, rather than almost like with these band-aids, like giving them a load of band-aids around motivation and optimization and performance and, oh, you just need to have a better 5-point plan or whatever. All of that stuff's fine, but it's a band-aid. It's not the surgery. The surgery is what actually gets real results for our clients. And so an example of this, let me just kind of, again, bring it to life a little bit. A lot of stuff out there talks about mindset work, okay, positive thinking, say your affirmations, okay, every morning in the mirror. Again, all good stuff. But really, when we start to get underneath that, what's usually happening is that it's masking fear that's there. And really, that fear doesn't get a voice, right? It's like, well, squash it out through your positive affirmations. Don't listen to the voice of fear. Choose love over fear, okay? And again, okay, great advice, nothing wrong with that. But that fear doesn't just disappear because we decide to mask it, because we decide to stick a sticky plaster over the top of it. Similarly with things like hyper-discipline, you got to stay super focused and like optimization and hacks, like body hacks and stuff, okay? All fine. But have you ever noticed that sometimes these kind of messages of hyper-discipline actually can be an adaptation of the small lost part of ourselves that feels out of control? I'm more interested in that part. What's the part of us that feels small, that feels lost, that feels out of control, that feels like to cope, it needs to be super hyper-disciplined, super high-performing, super perfectionistic? Got it? So it's like, what's the root here? Even things like the regulation of emotion, all right? So we can put our feet on the ground and we can sit with our eyes closed and have an awareness of what's happening in our body in those moments when anxiety or fear comes up for us, or sadness, or whatever it happens to be. And that's amazing. And what is your mind doing in those moments? We're taught to suspend the thoughts, suspend the mind, ignore the ego. Good luck with that. Okay. So this is more about working with the body, but also how the mind wants to come in and interfere with that. Why? Why does it want to interfere? What shadow dynamic is causing that? Because again, we can just keep regulating ourselves and sitting with our emotions or being hyper disciplined and just thinking positively and saying our affirmations. But what is that stuff masking? And my real concern here is that so much of what is being taught is it's making people better performers rather than more integrated humans. Okay, we learn to perform regulation. We learn to perform positive thinking, shine up our ego, if you like, all right? Sort of make ourselves have a more appealing personality on the outside. But really what's happening in those deep unconscious layers? How many band-aids does it take to keep that stuff at bay? And the truth is, there aren't enough band-aids to keep that stuff at bay, because the way that the unconscious works is that it must be seen. It is trying desperately to be seen and to be integrated. And this is where we're having an entirely different conversation. Most of the coaching conversations out there are around habits and mindsets and goals and optimizing yourself and polishing up your persona and how to be a better human. But this kind of idea of internal mastery, of really understanding yourself deeply, that's where the real change lies, okay? So leading on from that, the second part that I wanted to give a voice to is this misconception that's often out there around what self-sabotage is. And so we often hear, and self-sabotage is a great term, I think, just as a bit of a catch-all, right, around resistance and, behaviors that sort of are counterproductive to the goals we say we want to achieve, okay? And so let's talk about it. So self-sabotage often looks like procrastination, as I said before, being really inconsistent, okay? So you know the map, you've got the map in front of you and you know from where you've got to go from A to Z on that map, but you might sort of go to point C and then you kind of backtrack to point B, okay? Or you sidestep to point K, or do you know what I mean? So it's like you're kind of inconsistent, inconsistent results, inconsistent movement forwards as well. It can also look like, particularly in coaching, it can look like undercharging as well, and having some real money stories there, I guess, that are keeping you stuck. And again, it goes deeper than just stories. Often there are shadow parts here too. dark shadow, light shadow parts too that can be playing into that, as well as a lot of fear and ego story as well. It's more nuanced than just kind of, oh, well, this is a shadow part, right? Self-sabotage can also look like just ghosting or disappearing online. We see that a lot where people might show up, they might post a couple of posts, all right, for their new business, and then suddenly they disappear for 2 months and we don't see them again. Self-sabotage can also look like patterns of burnout as well, all right, and which is a really interesting one. It takes a lot of psychic energy to keep parts of ourselves at bay, which really is what self-sabotage is about. It's kind of too scary to be seen in our bigness and brightness and boldness and new chapter. So it's exhausting. Being scared is exhausting. So burnout cycles and fatigue and things can also have a little bit of a self-sabotage element to them too. But often what is labeled as self-sabotage, and this is the really curious part, it's often a protection system, okay? It's very intelligent. It's operating subconsciously. It's in the background. And again, it's oversimplified to say that self-sabotage is part of our shadow. We hear this a lot, right? The shadow is often demonized, by the way, which is, oh, well, that's just a shadow. That's just your shadow taking you out. Oh, you're resistant because your shadow, is at play. But it's more specific than that. Usually it's more like the dynamic between how the unconscious and the conscious processes are interacting. So for example, the ego, which is conscious, okay, conscious part of us, can want a goal, right? I want to achieve 10K months in my business. I want to show up and I want to lose 50 pounds. And the ego can also simultaneously defend against the person's golden shadow, their greatness, their boldness, the part of them that has the thing that they say they want. Because the ego is also massively invested in keeping us in our comfort zone. This is where it's tricky. It's not enough, again, looking at a completely different map here. A lot of people then would go in and say, oh, we just need to set better goals for you, all right? Or we just need to, this is a shadow part. We need to say some affirmations to kind of counter it and push it away. What's really happening, though, is that we need to work at the level of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. How are they interacting together? How can we want the goal yet also have one foot on the brake? Often that's a lot more complicated than just, oh, it's just your shadow, okay? Because people aren't just working against themselves for no reason, all right? Our clients aren't just kind of self-sabotaging for no reason. And if we're really honest, maybe we can see ourselves in this too, right? But really what's happening beneath the surface is that there is these unconscious dynamics, competing forces, as I said before, but also identity fusion. We become so attached to who we believe ourselves to be that doing something that's completely different to that, even though we desire it, can obviously feel really scary. There can be internal conflict, adaptive structures, fear, okay? Also, the body is doing another thing too. So it's like this behavior of sabotage, it starts to make a lot more sense, doesn't it? When you can kind of view it as this communication from the psyche, not just laziness or a lack of motivation or a lack of skill or pathology or whatever. It's like, there's just some communication here. So being able to speak that language, being able to read that type of a map with these hidden potholes, okay, and these little invisible barriers that are there, that's when we can start to make sense of this in our clients, but also for us as well. Third thing that I wanted to just mention is how spirituality and somatics can become bypasses. I think before I get into it, I want to just say both of these are incredibly powerful. Some of the somatic work that I've done has been absolutely life-changing in my life, okay? But I think where sometimes we get it wrong a little bit, and I've definitely been guilty of this too, is that awareness on its own doesn't actually help a client navigate the very real barriers that they can encounter. We could be doing everything right. We can be helping the client understand their bodies more. We can help the client regulate more. We can help them achieve some insights around what their body is saying or doing in a particular moment, where the resistance sits, for example. But without that deeper layer of reorganization and restructuring within the psyche, that stuff's great and it's going to leave your clients feeling amazing and doesn't necessarily lead to behavioral change. Got it? In the long run, transformational change. So nervous system regulation without, say, an inquiry into the unconscious dynamics that are shaping it is a good example. Having an understanding of those dynamics are key. Spirituality as well, it can become transcendence. And we talk about a lot of spiritual, people in the spiritual world, you would know this. We talk a lot about ascension, okay, and higher levels of consciousness and feeling more high vibe. And we sort of move into this place of ascension. But actually, there's a real danger in that because sometimes that can become about bypassing rather than being about integration. And it can be about bypassing what's actually happening in someone's life, right? The real work is to go deeper. Awareness is not the same as transformation. Regulation of the nervous system is not the same as shadow integration. Insight doesn't reorganize psychic structures. And so again, it's just a little note on spirituality and somatics and how powerful they are. But also there's just this kind of feeling where there's a deeper layer of restructuring that also needs to come into the conversation. And so this sort of leads me on to this part 4, where I wanted to touch on the, it's like the concept of the idealized self. This is a real big one for me. Okay, it's when I look at the industry, it kind of touches back to some of the self-improvement stuff I spoke about, but so much of this industry, so much of the marketing, so much of the messaging that's out there is about reinforcing this fantasy of becoming a perfected, healed, highly functioning version of ourselves, right? That's the goal. It's like self-improvement becomes about reinforcing an ideal. It's about becoming better and healed and high vibe and more successful. And okay, that's great. The part that I want to know about, the part that I'm really interested in is, well, what's been split off in order for you to achieve that success? And how is that hindering you from behind the scenes? What's actually unconscious and disowned? We talk about, we sort of talk about wanting to move towards these greater levels of healing and high vibration. Okay, what's been disowned in that process? What adaptation is organizing the personality, right? Where's the ego here? Is the ego just glutting on spiritual concepts and the idea of being better and more successful and more healed? And look how shiny I am now. What's happening beneath the surface of that? Got it? So it's this kind of idea, and I see this a lot with particular modalities too, where we talk about the true self as being almost like an ideal. Well, we've got to remove all of the layers and we've got to move towards this idea of the true self, which is this perfect, calm, compassionate version of us. Okay, and here's where I beg to differ. The true self is going to look different for everybody. The true self can look a little bit wild. The true self can be a little bit disorganized sometimes. The true self is not this wholly perfect ideal that we need to strive towards. The true self is the whole self. And guess what? The whole self can be messy. The whole self can be wild and creative and spirited and free. All right? So much of what's out there in terms of modern coaching and self-development, it's helping people perfect the ego, right? Have a better personality, shine yourself up, rather than truly understanding it, understanding what's been exiled. So I really believe, and this is so important, that this kind of idea of internal mastery, it's not about becoming perfect. And we've got to be really freaking careful of that in this industry. It's about becoming more whole. That includes, guess what, our darkness. So that's certainly the principle that I operate from, particularly in my work and in what I teach in the Psychodynamic Coach Academy as well. But it sort of brings me on to my final point around, well, what is really internal mastery? Why is that the thing that ultimately leads on to the growth and success and transformation of our clients, but also us? Well, It's about becoming real, not more perfected. Okay. And sometimes we find our clients, they're wanting to walk the map so perfectly, they're getting themselves caught up in knots, trying to do the right thing at the right time. They're beating themselves up because they've failed in one little area, or they've slipped, and they've gone off somewhere else, and all of that's okay. But it's like, well, why is that happening? Number one. But number two, how can we integrate that? How can we relate to these unconscious dynamics that are happening beneath the surface? How can we work more with integration rather than being the best, most optimal performing human being? How can we start to integrate the shadow a little more, the dark shadow, but also the golden shadow, our bigness and brilliance? How can we develop our capacity, if you like, to stay conscious when we're triggered and all over the place? How can we start to learn the language of the psyche to become less fragmented? That's what real mastery is. This is the stuff that allows our clients to rip up their goals, frankly, and set new intentions based on who they truly are, their whole self. Because so many of the goals that we can set in coaching come from the ego and what we think we should want and blah, blah, blah. Who are they underneath that? Okay. Because when we come from a place of integration and working with the unconscious dynamics, our goals start to look very differently. We move up, we move through life very differently. We relate differently to people in our worlds as well. All right. So it's when we can start to understand the psyche more deeply, that transformation that we're doing with our clients becomes less self-improvement, if you like, and more real, frankly. So knowing that we're working with a map currently that's a good map, and there's almost like this kind of little hidden overlay. It's like, and when we can start to see where these hidden little potholes are, these invisible barriers, as I said before, the little kind of the secret passage through here, that's when things start to become so real and so incredible for our clients. And really, this is probably the main reason that I created the Psychodynamic Coach Academy. So many coaches intuitively sense, and I know this because I talk to a lot of them, that surface level transformation and self-improvement isn't enough, okay? But the truth is they've just never been given a deeper framework, a deeper map, if you like, the map with the hidden overlays, right? For understanding those dynamics, all right? Things like identity, adaptation, resistance, real transformation, shadow, ego, how it's all the psychic architecture. It's all very different. And so I think when we have that level of understanding, that's when transformation becomes real. And so I would just end by saying, firstly, I hope you enjoyed this episode, but secondly, by saying we are currently enrolling our June cohort for the Psychodynamic Coach Academy. We get started on the 22nd of June, which is very exciting. We haven't run a cohort at this time of year before, but we are getting a lot of requests. So we've opened up this particular cohort, super excited. It's going to be optimized for those who are based in the US and Canada as well. We're working with a very global audience, so trying to find times and cohorts that work for everybody is an opportunity and a challenge, of course. But this one is very much going to be optimized for those in Canada and all time zones in the US as well, okay? So would invite you, as always, just to check out that program page if it's calling you. And your next step is to really book a consultation call with me. We can talk about it, make sure it's a good fit, make sure you got your questions answered, and all of that good stuff. So we can take it from there. But any questions as well, you're welcome to shoot me an email or contact me on social media. All of my details are posted around this particular episode. But if this is where I leave you, thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like and follow this episode, and also like and follow my content on social media too. It really does help get the word out there. Take care, and we'll see you soon.